everyone, welcome back. My name is Diana. This is my channel Bookish Di, and today I am doing the mid-year book freakout tag, as well as talking about some of my reading stats for the first half of 2021. So before I get started with the tag, I just want to discuss discuss the stats. So from January through the end of June, I read 37 books. This puts me on track for my goal of reading at 75 books, but I will say I've noticed the last few months my reading has slowed down. In the first few months, in January and February, I read 7 books. In March, I read 9 books. And then ever since then, my readings just kind of really slowed down. So in April, I read 5 books. May, I read 4 books. And in June, I read 5 books again. So I'm hoping with July, I can kickstart my reading again and give myself a little bit more comfort in terms of reaching my overall reading goal. So some other stats. So one of the goals that I had for 2021 was to read 30% authors of color, BIPOC authors. And so I'm really glad to say that so far I am exceeding that goal. So for 2021 so far, I have read about 49 books written by BIPOC authors, which is great. And I'm hoping to keep that momentum going throughout the second half of 2021. Some other stats I've actually done a decent number of rereads. So 8 of my books have been rereads, and that's mostly been Shauna McGuire's books and Murderbot, as well as Gideon the Ninth. I have read 8 books that I purchased in 2021, which is not great considering how many books I've bought so far this year. So I need to do better on that. I've read 12 books I've already owned. This includes my rereads. And then 17 of my books have been from the library. Pretty much all of my books have been for fun. And then in terms of age breakdowns, age and genre breakdowns, this is where it's really fascinating for me. And because it feels like such a shift from previous years. So I have read 32 adult books, 4 YA books, and 1 middle grade book. And normally I read more YA, but lately this year I've just been reading way more adult books. And part of the reason I think I've been reading more adult books is one, my rereads. My rereads have been adult, but also I've been reading more nonfiction this year than I normally do. So far I've read 7 nonfiction books, 30 fiction books. Yeah, it's kind of been an interesting reading year for me so far. And I've also, in terms of genre, I haven't really been reading a lot of SF. I haven't comparatively been reading a lot of SFF. Most of my SFF have been rereads. So the Murderbot books, the Shauna McGuire books, and Gideon. I did read, Chilling Effect, which I read, the Star Wars books. I've read, I'm not completely blanking on stuff that I've read, which is great. Song of Blood and Stone, but I feel like given the types of books I normally read, this is a very low SFF year for me. I've been reading more nonfiction. I've been reading more romance, some mysteries and thrillers. So very different than my normal sample of books. So those are my stats. Anyway, just wanted to talk about that a little bit before I get into the tag. So this tag was originally created by Chami and Ellie, and I will link the originals down below. This is my first time doing the mid-year book freakout tag. And I will say at least one of the questions is not super relevant for me, but anyway, here we go. So the first question is the best book that you've read so far this year. And this was tough because I've had some really great books, but I think for me, the one that really sticks out to me the most still, even though I read it in January, was The Four Profound Weaves by R.B. Limberg. This is a fantasy novella centered onto elder trans folks and deals with them and focuses on their quest to try and track down the remaining 4 profound weaves so that one of them can get their name. And this was just like a very lovely novella about hope and the struggle and finding your community. And I just, like, even months later, I still think about it. And I love how hopeful it was at the end. And it was definitely something that coming out of 2020, going into 2021, that I think I really needed. And it's definitely something, again, where I need to finally buy a physical copy so I can reread it and have it on my shelf. And I definitely am interested in seeing what Lundberg comes out with next. The second question is the best sequel that you've read so far in 2021. And I have read some good sequels this year. I've read, Murderbot. But I think for me, the best sequel was Winterkeep by Christian Kishore. This is the 4th book in her Graceling Realms series. And I loved everything about that book. So it's set several years after the conclusion of Bitter Blue, and it focuses on 3 characters: Bitter Blue, her friend and advisor Gideon, as well as the keepish young woman Lovisa, and deals with secrets in Winterkeep, and it deals with surviving abuse and learning that you have value. And oh my God, this was just such a good book. I talked about it a lot in my March wrap up, as well as my Tome Topple reading blog. If you like the Graceling series and haven't picked this up yet, I highly, highly recommend it. I think Kishore really I know there's a lot of talk about the authors coming back to works after many years, and I think Kishore avoids that trap so well, in part because her series had never been about one character. They had always focused on different characters, but I think is also that this was a good story in terms of returning to. So yeah, I loved this book so much. Definitely the best sequel that I read so far in 2021. So the third question is a new release that you haven't read but want to, and that is Aetherbound by E.K. Johnston. This is a book I have been looking forward to so much that I'm almost afraid to read it. So this book has been described as Jupiter Ascending meets the Fisher's Queen, This book has been described as Jupiter Ascending meets the Fisher King meets the Newfoundland cod fisheries collapse of the early 1990s, and centers on a young woman, Pent, who is trying to escape an abusive family and comes to Bannock Station and meets twin brothers, Ned and Fisher. And yeah, I want to read this. I'm just so scared that I won't love it, because it just sounds so much like my jam, and I love E.K. Johnston's writing so much. But this is going to be a priority for me in the latter half of 2021. I'm trying to decide if I want to read the physical copy or listen to the audiobook, because Ashley Eckstein, who is the voice for Ahsoka Tano, reads the audiobook, and so I can't decide what version I want. So that's part of the reason, another reason I haven't read it yet. The fourth question is your most anticipated release for the second half of 2021, and there are a number of books, but for me, my most anticipated release is When Sorrows Come by Sean McGuire. This is the new Toby Day book, and it is the wedding book, and I'm so excited and so scared, because the full quote is, "When sorrows come, they come not as single spies, but as full battalions," and I'm so worried. She said that the accompanying novella is just like fluff at the reception, which is good, but I'm also just oh my God, I'm still nervous about the journey to get there, because I love Toby and Tybalt so much. They're such a great couple, and I love all the I love a lot of the side characters in this series, and I'm so scared, and I'm so excited, and early September. I have to hold out till early September. So the fifth question is your biggest disappointment in 2021, and this one for me is Act Your Age, Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert. That's not to say I didn't like this book, but it was my least favorite of the Brown series. I talked a bit about this in my June wrap-up, but it really came down to the fact that I had loved Get a Life Chloe Brown and Take a Hint Danny Brown so much, and this just didn't live up to it, especially because I had seen a number of friends talk about, oh my god, this is my favorite book in the series, or this is so good, and there were key elements in this book that just didn't really work for me in that same way. And so while I enjoyed the middle component and I liked Jacob and Eve as characters and I liked their relationship, there was enough that I didn't like where it was overall a disappointment considering my love of the other books in the series. All right. So the sixth question is your biggest surprise so far, and I am going to double dip a bit again. I'm going to say Winter Keep by Christian Cashore just because it was so good, and again, it avoided the pitfalls that a lot of late arriving sequels fall into, so loved this book so much. I just, top book of 2021, I can already feel it. The seventh question is your favorite new author in 2021, and for me that is going to be Intisar Kanani, who wrote Thorn, which I really enjoyed. This is a retelling of The Goose Girl, and it was lovely. I loved the characters, I loved the story, I liked its meditations on justice and how we try and get justice. I have the follow-up book. It's not a direct sequel, it follows different characters. I bought it just because I loved this book so much, and it is on my TBR for later this year. The eighth question is your new favorite fictional crush, and this I'm going to skip because I don't really get crushes on book characters. And yeah, I was thinking about putting Geode as a kind of a joke, but also Geode is great. He's a sentient rock in Claudia Gray's Star Wars novel. Geode is awesome. So the ninth question is your favorite character, and I'm kind of tempted to put Geode, but I would say also Vernestra Rowe from Test of Courage by Justina Ireland. I really liked her as a character. She is a newly minted Jedi Knight, and it was really interesting to read about a very young Jedi Knight trying to feel out her place in the Order, as well as try and mentor other characters and try and get them out of the messy situation that they're in. Yeah, I love Vernestra. She was fantastic, and I'm really glad she's showing up in Justina Ireland's YA novel. Question number 10 is the book that made you cry, and for me this was Missing from the Village by Justin Ling. This is a nonfiction book looking at the disappearance of marginalized gay men in Toronto's gay village, and examining the systems that led to not only their marginalization, but also the fact that they went missing for so long before justice was served, because they had been victims of serial killer Bruce McArthur. And this is something I talked about in my May wrap up, but this book just had so much rage and grief and empathy towards the victims and the communities that they left behind. And there were just several points where I was just tearing up during this book. It was a very difficult read, but it was very, very good. And if you're in the right headspace for it, I would highly recommend it, particularly the audiobook. Justin Ling also hosts the CBC podcast, The Village. So the first season discusses several cold cases that were begun to that the police started looking into again when Bruce McArthur was collected. And so again, it goes into the history of Toronto's gay village, the history of policing queer identities, as well as discussing again why these cases were cold for so long. And then season 2 is discussing the deaths of several transgender women in Toronto's village, and again looking at the systems that marginalize them. There are only 2 episodes so far, but it's a lot Ling does a good job of amplifying trans voices in this series and interviewing trans activists who are specifically talking about, again, the marginalizations, their marginalizations and the systems that exploit that. Question 11 is the book that made you the happiest. And so for me, that was Network Effect by Martha Wells. I adore Murderbot so much. I love it. I love art. I love all its humans. This one just, it made me so happy reading this. I had been a reading slump and I ended up reading this very, very quickly. And I think it kind of broke me out of my reading slump because I've been reading more since I finished this. And yeah, it was so good. I loved it a lot. There were several points I was just like, oh, Murderbot, you love your humans and the art so much. Just, you don't want to admit it. Anyway, fantastic book. Loved it so much. It was great. Question 12 is the most beautiful book that you've bought this year. And so that would be my out of print book special edition of Light of the Jedi. So this one came with an exclusive dust jacket and it's just so pretty. You have Jedi and Nile riding space horses. You have Best Girl Ember helping lead the charge. Yeah, this was so pretty. I'm very happy that I ended up getting this edition. It hasn't arrived yet, but I also got the the out of print edition for Rising Storm, which is the next adult novel. But yeah, I love this cover so much. The final question is, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? And this is all the Hugo nominees. I think I've talked about it at various points, but like, for example, this is a stack of books that I own that are nominated for the Hugos: Lodestar and Astounding that I haven't read yet. I have more, which I'm not going to show you because that would require dislodging a precariously piled stack of books. But yeah, I have a lot of books I need to read for the Hugo Awards, so I can vote. I have started making progress with it, but I still have a ways to go. So thank God that voting closes in November because I am going to need all that time. So yeah, that is my mid-year book. So yes, that is my mid-year book Freakout tag. I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know if you have thoughts on any of the books that I mentioned in the comments below. If you like what you see, please like and subscribe. Thank you all so much for watching. I will see you all next time. Bye.